Okay, so let's see how all this got started. Probably a month, 2 months ago, John wanted to come over and said, could we do a layout tour and see what you got? And I said, well, I'm still a little nervous about this COVID-19 thing, and you guys there's not very much to see. And we got talking back and forth, and he said, well, what we really wanted to do was find out, what kind of things I thought about the decisions I made, how I went about designing, what kind of equipment I had and stuff like that. So really this presentation is kind of in response to the questions John had about what I've been doing. So I started putting the presentation together, and the first thing is whenever you do a virtual layout tour, any kind of layout tour, actually, you gotta have a name for the railroad. And my creative juices were not flowing very well when I put this slideshow together, so I said, okay, I'm just gonna call it another no-name railroad. Now, what's also interesting is shortly after I did the first cut at the slides, and I was contacted by Richard Frazier, and some of you guys may know him from Days at Intermountain. He's at the Northern Colorado Club, and he wanted to know if I had anything I could present to those guys. So I polished it up and did the first presentation to them, so you guys are going to see the second. And then I've got another presentation on the same thing next week to the Front Range Division out of Golden. Anyway, so this is the ANNR, another no-name railroad. Okay, roughly, here's what I'm going to talk about in this order. First of all, I want to mention the things that I like and I influence, because this really, is what kind of drives the whole concept of what I'm going to be trying to do. Then I'm going to get into, those of you who are familiar with John Armstrong's work, a way of focusing your attention is I'm going to talk about some givens and druthers. We'll look at the layout room a little bit, how I'm doing construction, and then I want to focus on various areas as we go around the layout, saying here's what I want to do with this and why. I'll look at the equipment a little bit and end up with just a little bit on the technology that I'm using. So, yeah, you got to make some decisions. It's all a trade-off. Things I like long trains, which is the main reason I'm in N-scale. Those of you who have driven through Wyoming on Interstate 80, there's Green River, which is about 3/4 of the way, 2/3 of the way across the state, something like that. And Green River has a nice big yard. This picture was taken on the west side of the yard, I guess, or maybe north. I don't remember. It's north and south or east-west. But anyway, Green River, if you've never been there and you're going through Wyoming, it's definitely worth it to stop, because they have a nice big yard. It's a classification yard. It's full. There's a lot more stuff going on there than, say, in Laramie. There's a pedestrian overpass. You can walk across the yard, and the whole area is just enclosed in this great big time warp. I say that because several times I've gone through there, and the guys I'm with say, oh, let's stop and see what's going on in Green River. Sure. And, well, we can only spend about 10 minutes because we got to be in Salt Lake City or something like that. Well, anyway, we'll go and we'll get on the bridge and we'll walk across it. And we'll come back and we'll look at the clock, and it'll be about 10 after the hour. But the problem is it's an hour and 10 minutes later, and not 10 minutes. So, and you go, where did that hour go? Anyway, it's just a really fascinating place. So what you're looking at here, and this isn't a very good picture, but I don't have a good lens for my camera to show what I was really trying to do. This is basically the yard throat, where all the class tracks come together, the AD tracks, and the trains depart from. So what you're looking at, this train has pulled a couple cuts of classification tracks. And he had pulled out, we thought he was getting ready to leave, and he backed in and grabbed another one. So he goes this way, he goes way out here, he comes back around here, comes way back here, and that's the head end way over there. So pretty neat stuff. Again, like I said, if you ever get through go just blowing through Green River. Don't plan on stopping for 10 minutes. Okay, next thing. Classification, as you can imagine. This, of course, is the, I think it's the West Hump at Bailey Yard, North Platte. I like to classify. And I also, this picture tells me how bad a photographer I am in terms of exposure and stuff like that. But classification. I like bridges. And again, this is another picture to remind me how bad of a photographer I am because of how crooked it is. But anyway, this bridge is the cross the Mississippi at Burlington, Iowa. It's where the BNSF crosses from Illinois into Iowa. And we were there not to see the towboat come through, but rather Amtrak number 5 is waiting on the Illinois side, waiting for the drawbridge to come down so they could come across. And then he'll come across the bridge, and then he'll come right down here. So bridges are neat. I like coal. This is from the Powder River Basin up in Wyoming. And you can see a little bit of type of stuff they do. Nice long coal train. Here's the flood loader. We'll talk a little bit about this later on. Now, what's really interesting is there's this little blue building in the background. And it looks a lot like a Pike Stuff kit. So if I can do a coal mine and I've got a kit that's that color, that should work just fine for it. I like tunnels. This is Mullen Tunnel. And again, I'm overexposed here. Camera focused, I think, on this black stuff in here and couldn't adjust the lighting very well. So Mullen Tunnel, if you're not familiar with it, is, and I always get this wrong, east of Missoula, Montana. I'd swear it's west, but I believe it's east of Missoula. And we were there on the Friends of the Bronx Northern had a convention up there several years ago, and we went out and did a lot of rail fanning. It was great. Another picture I took on that trip up to Missoula was the High Bridge, and this now would be west of Missoula. Beautiful scene there. I like signals, as a lot of you guys who know me probably know. So here's a couple of bridges. This is on the east side of Hershey, Nebraska. Hershey is just west of North Platte. So there's a 4-track main coming out of North Platte headed west, and they basically queue and stack up trains here after they get out of the yard before they hit a place called O'Fallon's. And that is an incredible place as well, simply because you have 4 tracks. They split, 2 go west, 2 go north, and you've got all this intricate track work in which you can get from about any track to any track. And in fact, there's a little used track that they actually have a Y in there as well. And it's only maybe 100 yards off of Highway 30. Again, if you go through that area, it's a great place. You can go down there, and because it's off of a public road, they won't, throw you in the hoosegow for watching trains down there. So let's talk about influences. The first major influence I had is when I moved to Colorado. I met up with Doug Geiger because his fiance at that time was a friend of my wife's, and we came here and we met up with Doug. And eventually I got on Doug's crew, and I've been operating on his layout since probably 91 or 92. So that's where I learned most of the things I knew about operations. Second influence would be Pat Lana's Kranich, in-scale, large in-scale Kranich down Lakewood. He was on John Marlin set some layout tours in South Denver, or down Denver, I think it was a year ago, and Pat was on there. I've been working with Pat since, I want to say 1999. We've been honing his operating sessions and kind of learning together about how you can do things in scale. Of course, John Parker's BNSF Fall River and Longmont, exceptional railroad there. Fun layout, huge. Last year, I think also the BMRC had the layout tours, and if I remember right, I was there and saw some of you guys come through on Jim Ferentz's CNS HO scale in North Boulder. So what's neat about it is, first of all, the detail he's got. There's no way I'm going to be able to get that kind of detail. But the thing that's inspiring about it is how much he was able to put into 2 rooms in a downstairs basement. So that's what's neat about it. Finally, Paul Brennecke's Grand Road. You've probably seen it in magazine articles, in the Marine calendar and stuff like that. What makes Paul's different from all of these is that his is a railfan layout. It's not an operating layout. So in other words, what he likes to do is just go in and watch the trains run around and all this gorgeous scenery that he's created. Furthermore, what makes it an inspiration is that the size of his room is about the amount of space that I have to work with. So again, nice in-scale layout. And finally, influences. John had pointed it out earlier, this book called Track Planning for Realistic Operations. So this is what you're looking at here is volume 2, I'm sorry, second edition, something like the 6th printing or something like that. And a lot of good material in there. John and I were emailing back and forth this morning, and it's not a novel, it's more like a reference material. But I love the cover on this one with these railroaders, these boomers out there trying to set the layout on the nose of a locomotive. So let's go to Gibbons and Druthers. What Armstrong proposed at one time is that when you start to do a layout, design a layout, put down your Gibbons and Druthers. Your Gibbons are things that can't be negotiated. These are the constraints, the boundaries on your design. And the Druthers are things that you want, but you could give them up if you have to. So here are the ones I came up with. And a lot of these are common to almost everybody. First of all is space. It's the room. You know, and, that often is fixed. You can't do much about it. You got a budget. And you know, out of that budget, you have to eat. You have to put a roof over your head as well as buy train supplies and things like that. So, you know, unless you rob a bank or something, you're kind of fixed on what that is as well. Time is a given. It's, you know, I figure I'm not going to be on this earth forever, and I want to do something that I can get enough done that I'll be able to run it before I depart. Along with time is age. I know that my body isn't as flexible or strong as it once was, and I have to design to accommodate that. I know what my modeling skills are. I don't enter into model contests. Once upon a time, I tried several times at the BMRC, and it was clear, you know, I don't have the skills there. I don't have the artistic eye. So I do enough. I guess I call myself a mediocre modeler. It's enough that you can get by. To give the idea of what you're trying to get across. And the nice thing about in-scale is that, you know, when you're 4 feet away from it, you can't tell all the flaws anyway. I like operations. I like switching, like running a class yard. I like switching towns. I like car routing, and I believe that having a purpose for the car movements adds a lot to the fun of the model railroad. And I do like rail fanning. Every once in a while, I want to be able to come down and just watch the train runs. My first layout that I did was a 4x8 HO scale, basically a figure 8 inside of an oval. And I enjoyed just watching the trains run around. And of course, given his end scale, I've got so much invested in and what I like in it, that's a given. Druthers, things that I want, but I could give up. I model what I see. And so that means I'm looking at modern stuff. I like 6-axle locomotives, and that drives some of you know, what the design is going to be like, curves and things like that. And that implies I like the longer cars, BNSF, UP paint schemes. It's what you see around here. I'm not rigid on arrow. I really like the DNR GW black and aspen gold paint scheme. But given if I do the modern, but you know, there's not, DNR GW isn't modern. So, but when you go with more of a modern type scheme, you can always accommodate the older equipment. You know, you can just say, well, it didn't get painted, or you know, it's or something like that. So I can run BN and DNRGW equipment on my layout and just claim, well, it's an excursion or a rail fence, or it never got painted or something like that. Whereas if I model like say the 70s or 80s, it just wouldn't look right to have a BNSF GEVO on that type of a layout. I'm not religious about prototypical accuracy. I'm a freelancer. I like cabooses. I think they're neat. Plus, they have the added benefit when you're running a train around and you see the caboose is missing. You better go looking for the rest of the cars because you lost them somewhere. So I'm willing to bend the rules. And like I say, I have no problems running a Rio Grande tunnel motor, for example. Okay, so those are kind of like my givens and druthers. This is what I'm looking for. Now I'm going to digress for a moment. These are my 3 laws of model railroading, and I've heard them in various places, but not all put together like this. And people kind of alluded to them. Well, I'm going to elucidate them right now. Rule number 1: you can never have enough space. Okay, and you think, well, somebody like even Warren Buffett, you think he's got enough space. I mean, he's got the BNSF, but yet, about once a year, you hear talks about them merging with somebody else and getting even bigger. You never have enough money. And again, you say, well, let's look at Warren Buffett. Well, he never has enough. You can never have enough time. So these are the kind of things you have to balance these as you do model railroading. You have to balance space versus money versus time. Now there's a corollary. And that is you can trade a lot of one for a little of another. For example, I could increase the amount of space I have, but it's going to cost me a lot of money to get a new place. So here's the layout room. I'm going to do I'll do a diagram first, and then I'll move the camera around. We can take a look at it in real time. But anyway, so one corner I've got a door. Can't block that off. I've got a table. I'm sitting at this desk right now with the computer. I have drawers over here that have my modeling supplies in them. I have a bookshelf, books, of course. I've got a window. I need access to that because that's our main ventilation in this room. I've got a closet, full-length closet here. When we bought the house off the builder, and they gave us the choice. We could either put bookshelves in here or a closet. We opted for the closet because we didn't know if we were going to turn this into a bedroom or not. And so it's got a partial wall here with folding doors across here. Here's the room. It's roughly 14.5 feet by about 9.5 feet. Okay. And what can I put in this room? Now I'm going to digress a minute. And when I sent John my first copy of this, I talked about Armstrong squares. And he says, is that an engineering term? And well, it's then that I realized a lot of people hadn't read the Armstrong books or looked at them. So here's a brief discussion about Armstrong squares. John Armstrong suggested that you can figure out what fits in how much model railroad you can fit in a room by, first of all, deciding on the size of the radius of your curves, and then you can convert that into a square, and then you just figure out how many squares will fit in your room, and that'll tell you how badly or how wildly your layout can curve. So an Armstrong square is what kind of a square would it take to enclose your standard radius curve of 90 degrees. Okay, and there's the formula for it. We'll look at a few examples of what that all means. And then he gave some samples, okay? He says if you're in, for example, a 16-inch curve, radius curve, then that's called conventional. And I'm thinking because of long wheelbase equipment, 16 is actually a little tight. I'd like to go with a standard would be like an 18-inch curve. So what'll fit? I'm in a room that's what we say is about 9 by 14, thereabouts. So a little bit larger than this. So his estimate is he would call that a large layout. And I don't think it's that large, but I think at the time that his books were written, that was large. So roughly 5 squares by 8 squares is what his estimate would be. If I'm, just going on back of the envelope, real gross here. So what will fit? If you wanted to do basically a circle, you need 4 squares, 90 degrees in each quadrant. And he gives some examples. You can do something like this where you can put 2 180-degree turns in by putting one on top of another. This is what's instructive for something like a yard, that you can get by with one square high for 10 tracks, but it's going to take you 5 squares long for each in order to get all the tracks in. So what you've traded is space in one direction for space in another direction. Okay, next. So if I were to use say a 20-inch square, 18-inch radius, I could do, what's this, 4 by, and I can't tell because I got stuff on top of 5 by 8 or something. So it'd be about 5 squares this way and about 8 squares this way. Or if I went with something smaller, say a 15-inch standard radius, I could do 6 by 9. So it'd be 6 squares this way, 9 squares this way. So what that means then is to do a circle, I need 2 squares in each direction. To do, say, like a peninsula where you come in, go out the peninsula and come back in and go in the same direction, you need 6 squares. So he then went and talked about here are his alphabets. So in other words, given that the squares that you have in your space, here are the types of layouts, diagrams you could put into it. So for example, if I'm doing, let's say 5 by 8, I could do, here's a 4 by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's a 4 by 7 would fit. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 by 3. And if I stretch this side, I could do a 5 by 8 easily. And so consequently, I'm going to be doing something like that. And I looked at all these others. What's deceptive about what he's done here is he's allowed aisle space to go into the layouts. But if you're in scale, a square is, let's say a square is 20 inches. That's a really, really tight aisle. I mean, that's not really an aisle. And then the other thing that's ignored here is that, like for this layout, he's got 2 aisles coming in, but there's no way to get to them if he does not account for any aisleway around the sides of the layout to get around it. So what I'm really getting at saying is that these are ideas that you might want to try, but it's not really very practical. So here are my design standards. Here are the things I decided on that I wanted to do. First of all, I wanted only 2 to 3 operators. It's a small enough room, and I'm going to give up, as you'll see as we go through here, I'm going to cut down on the aisle space, and I'm going to sacrifice operator people room for track room, for just track area. Height, where I'm going to call earth or the rail head, it's going to be about 50 inches off the floor. And that's dictated by 2 things. There's a shelf bracket in the closet that I want to get under. And and since I want to keep my desk here, I need to have headroom above the desk so I don't bump my head all the time. And 50 inches works out as just fits right between those 2. I'm going to sacrifice aisle width. I'm going to go 2 feet to 2.5 feet typical for more railroad. And I'm going on the assumption that I'm slender enough right for now, and so most of my friends will be potential operators. Plus, I'm not going to have, the only choke point will be really on the way in and out of the room, getting past the yard operator. So I think we'll be able to get by. In other words, people come in, they'll basically work in the same geographical area most of the time. No duck hunters. I'm getting too old for crawling on my knees. No lift outs, but I think they're acceptable for everyday use, and by that I mean if you put them in place during a session and you can get around, that's great. But if you're not using the railroad, then I can remove it when it's not in use. I want to make it sectional, and so I can remove the sections wherever possible. And the reason for that is I want to be able to pull a section up and put it on the floor, for example, and move it somewhere else, because I'm getting too old for laying on my back and soldering over my head and dripping solder on myself and stuff like that. The sidings are going to be sized to the longest train length. And in writing this out, I realized that maybe I've invented a very ad hoc unit of measure here called the longest train length. In other words, what's the longest length train you want to run? I want the siding spaced at least one longest train length apart. The wisdom behind this is it looks funny to have a train entering one siding before the caboose has left the previous siding or passing area. I want the largest yard or staging track should be at least one longest train length yard long, so I can bring a train in and leave it on a track without having to break it up. Because the long wheelbase equipment, I want to do 18-inch mainline standard radius. I'll settle for 15-inch in places, and in fact, I think there's one place where I have a 15-inch minimum radius, because that's about all I can fit in. That also means large turnouts on the main line. I'm going to use medium in the switching areas. Pat Lana claims that on his layout that if he had to do it all over again, he'd do nothing but large turnouts. He said the smaller ones are just too much of a pain, too much derailment. I'm going to motorize hard to reach turnouts, and those are going to be ganged together. And by that I mean typically if you have a crossover from one main line to another where you have to throw two turnouts in tandem, I'm going to motorize those so they turn in concert. I'm going to avoid tight S-curves on the main line. And finally, I'm going to extend the fascia above the roadbed to, if not prevent, at least discourage crashes to the floor, because I'm going to be probably running my track close to the edges within a couple inches. Okay, let's try a few sample sizes and see what'll fit in here. Now, typically, if you want to do like a 2.5 foot to say 3 foot aisle around, and I did an island type layout, this would give me about the 3 feet around. And as you can see, it's about 77 inches by 57. And that'd give me about 212 inches in main line. This area inside is practically unusable, because if you try to curve a track in here, you're going to be curving way over here. So there's an area in here you simply can't reach without going to very, very tight radii. Now, let's be realistic. If I put the furniture back in, I lost all that aisleway around the layout. So thinking, no, I don't think that's going to work for me. Okay, let's put it up against the wall. I can do that, and notice then because of that, I don't have to allow a couple feet, 3 feet over on this side, and I can pull the layout down this way. And I think I push things a little bit going this way too. I now have my aisle space. I got a little bit more mainline track, but I've introduced a real problem here. This area in here is unreachable, again, using standard radius curves. Well, first of all, you can't put track in here, and second of all, my arm reach just isn't that long, particularly back in here. So that's really not an acceptable layout. Okay, let's go around the wall rather than an island. So let's be inside of it rather than outside of it. And this is starting to look a lot more encouraging. We're now up to 466 inches in mainline, so I practically doubled it. I'm only about a foot wide around it. I can reach in real well. I got lots of straights that I can do things like put the yard off of, switching areas and stuff like that. So now it's starting to look a lot better. Two killers though. One is access over here. How am I going to get in and out of the room, which is kind of important. And then the closet also is inaccessible. I can't use it for anything. I can't get in and out. So let's try a water wing type of design. We'll do some, Fred Yeager's call these blobs. So where you turn back on yourself. I can now get in Lost a little bit of main line because this is 822 inches. So this isn't too bad, except this area is still inaccessible back in here. So, but this is starting to look more and more intriguing. And the way I got the extra, almost doubled the main line, is because now I've lost somewhat, some people call it scenic purity. In other words, scenic purity is you go through a scene in one direction only once. And here you go through every scene twice. So I basically doubled the main line by giving up scenic purity. And another thing to notice is, again, if I tried to do, and I see this area in here and say, you know, I'd really like to be able to put something in here. If I tried to do a peninsula using, again, my standard radius, it won't fit. And again, I think the Armstrong squares would tell me that, because that's 4 squares right there. And, you know, we have 2 right here. Here's a square, here's a square. So that would say I needed at least 6. And when we estimated it was only 5 would fit. Okay, so let's flip it around. Now I've got access to the closet area. That's not bad. I've got 40 inches here. That's a nice aisle, but I've lost my access. So we either have to go to a duck under or a lift out or something over in the corner here. What we ended up doing was, well, okay, let's pull this in a little bit. So now I've got access. I can walk around. I can walk around here. So not too bad. And the drawback is right there. That's about a foot, and I can't squeeze through there. So I ended up with something like this. What I did was I took the lower blob and I pushed it into here, and I said, I'm just going to take over the closet. And I didn't want to punch any holes in the wall down here, but I'll sacrifice that. So I'll put staging in here, and I've got a nice aisleway in here. And I've got space through here for a dispatch, or not a dispatcher, but a yard guy to classify and break down and make up trains. I got an area nice in here over the desk in which I can do switching. And we'll look at all these areas in more detail in just a few minutes. So this is kind of what I've come to. And that's what the benchwork kind of looks like. So for construction, most of it's going to be 1x4 open grid work. In other words, you know, just make a frame using 1x4s. The reason I settled on this is that one of my friends was building a layout in his basement, and he moved to South Carolina, and he had a whole lot of stuff to get rid of, which was, you know, great for me. And he had these frames built up, and so I grabbed half a dozen of them. What's interesting is he'd gotten these frames from another guy who had gotten out of the hobby and stuff like that, so they've been passed around a little bit. So immediately I got framework I can put stuff on. The ones I build myself, I've got 1x2s, so I'll do open grid frames using the 1x2s. I think that's going to work for us. My experience is that once upon a time I was in the Boulder Club from 91 to, I think it was 2007 or something. We had an in-scale group, and we built some modules using 1x2s and 2-inch extruded foam, and they worked out just fine. So I'm going to use open frames. I'm going to put 2-inch extruded foam across them. I'm going to make everything nice and level, so I don't have to worry about vertical curves. And I use the extruded foam because if I want some geologic variation, you know, I can always cut into it, for example, a creek or a ditch or something like that. It doesn't look exactly, I can get somewhat away from the plywood prairie look. I use 1x2 L girders for legs, and I'll put adjusters on the bottom, so I make everything nice and levels. Most of the stuff along the walls, I'll just tack to the walls using 15-inch twin track shelf brackets. I found those at Lowe's or, you know, Home Depot, very standard type stuff, or I can use the 20-inch twin track shelf brackets. If I don't have anything below it, I might use a 1-inch by 2-inch wood diagonal wood braces to make things nice and solid. I'll use a 6-inch wide, 8-inch hardboard for the fascia, and that's going to, like I said, raise a little bit up above the level of the 2-inch foam, so give me a little bit of a barrier so things don't go crashing to the floor. Wiring, 16-gauge bale wire. on the DCC main bus. I got this at Home Depot. 24-inch gauge wire on the track feeders. It's stuff that I've had laying around. It'll be solid or stranded. And some people say one's better than the other, and that's probably right, except I'm going to use what I got for the most part. Now, I found these. I can solder, but I think my soldering skills are probably about as good as my modeling skills. They're passable. I found this as I was looking for connectors. And I got this at Home Depot. It's a pusher. You just
excuse me. I hate to interrupt, but that layout back 2 slides.
Yeah.
You go just briefly so that I can punch alternate print screen, and I have it. Okay. Now, thank you.
You're welcome. Sure.
You go back, please, and keep going.
Okay, no problem. I'm open to whatever comments and stuff you guys have. If you've got questions. Okay, I got these, and I'm pretty sure this was at Home Depot. You just strip the wire back and push it in. And thus far, what I've done with them so far, they work pretty good. They claim you can pull the wire out, but that's not, I've had mixed results on that. Sometimes the wire just breaks. The worst problem is it's like so many wire connectors. You have to know what gauge wire you're going to use, because you buy this for a range of gauges like 22 to 18 or something like that. Another one for 18 to 14 or something. But this is a nice way of tying several wires together. Another thing I found on the internet, I was talking to another friend who's just starting to build a model railroad. He was looking for connectors, and he put me on to some. I started looking around, and something that's often popular is they're called suitcase connectors, is what I've always heard them called. If you go to Home Depot, they have no idea what you're talking about. Instead, they're called a splice connector. And how do you splice into a wire? Well, one way is you strip the insulation back, solder it, and then you got to tape it and insulate it and all that kind of stuff. Or you use these suitcase connectors, which you just put the connector inside the clamp and crimp it down. And typically, the typical suitcase connectors, you got a main line going through. It's 2 wires that you crimp together. The problem with those is that you use them once. And I know some people have tried to pull them apart and so on, and typically you break them. What this is kind of a combination. It's a variation of a suitcase. The wire goes in here, you crimp it. The wire you want to join in, you crimp into basically a spade lug. The spade lug plugs into here. The beauty of this is that, first of all, again, no soldering involved. If you want to disconnect your wires, for example, to isolate a short or something, you just unplug the spade lug. Pretty neat. And they're not, I'm trying to remember why I paid. It's like $14 for a couple hundred of these things or something like that. So they weren't expensive. And what I was really hoping is that I could get the suitcase piece would be like for 16 gauge. I get spade lugs for a 20 gauge or something like that, so I can match gauges. Because the typical suitcase, your 2 wires have to be the same gauge, except a few suitcases you can get a thin wire and a thick wire. But you can't, you're limited in flexibility. What I found out is that these are sized so that, same deal, if you have a 16 gauge main wire, the size of the hole here is for a 16 gauge. I think they don't want you to mix and match gauge sizes, but that doesn't mean you can't, plug it in and double it over and crimp it or solder it or something like that. And because the way they enforce that is they made the lugs, the spade lugs, a little bit different sized. But anyway, I'm playing with these and ask me in a year or two how well they work. So far, I'm really happy with them. So just go on the internet and Amazon, for example, and just ask for a T-tap splice wire connector. Okay, Trackwork Standards. I'm mostly Pico, code 55. The reason I'm doing it is that you guys know Pico, the 55, it's almost indestructible. In fact, if you have to cut a tie off of one after you've glued it down, it's almost impossible to get them undone because they bury so much of the rail into the tie. Um, the disadvantage of the Pico is that it's more of European tie spacing. The ties are wider. And if I had to do it again, I'd probably go with Atlas Code 55. At the time I was collecting stuff, Atlas was having trouble making Code 55 track and you just couldn't get it. The other disadvantage is I've heard people have had problems with the Atlas Code 55 turnouts. They tend to be a little bit on the fragile side. Again, when I was in the Boulder Club in the 90s and early 2000s, we had built a switching layout. And on that switching layout, we used microengineering, which is Code 55. And the turnout was always falling apart. It was just way too fragile. The Pico Code 55 turnouts, again, are almost indestructible. So I figured out what I need, and I've got all the 88 sticks of flex track. I've got the flex track, all the turnouts I need, a small Y crossing. This was one of those things, the inspection pit is you put it between the rails of a track, and it's the idea, the ties. The idea is then that a locomotive rolls across it and you inspect it for underneath. They're hard to find, and I got one while it was available. I also have some track set, as they're called, and basically it's ribbon rail. If you're using flex track and you want to bend, for example, an 18-inch curve, I've got ribbon track set that's 18-inch. That way I make sure I can run it through, it fits between the rails, and I run it around, make sure I'm not less than 18 inches and I don't have kinks and stuff like that. Now I'm also doing a little bit of Kato unit track. And the reason is I had a double track truss bridge I brought once upon a time because I thought it looked really neat. And as I was doing things, I found I needed a scissors track, and I liked the Kato scissors track much better than the Pico scissors track. It looks easy to use in the way it's gapped and electrically and stuff like that. So I added a couple of girder bridges and some piers and a number 6 turnout. We'll see that in a minute.
Rod?
Yeah.
I don't know what a scissors track is.
Okay. It's a double crossover. I'll show you here in just a minute.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. I've got DC Specialties PX4. So I'm going to split electrically. I'm going to split the layout into 4 different circuits. One of them will be, I'll probably put the yard in one. I'll put staging in one. I'll put the switching area in one, and probably the rest of the main line will be another one. So that way, if somebody shorts one area, the other areas aren't going to get shorted. I've got some Tam Valley depot equipment. I've decided I'm going with servos rather than tortoises. And the main reason is because when I was looking at buying tortoises, and even in bulk, they were like 18 bucks, 15 bucks a tortoise. You can get a servo if you really look around for about 2 bucks. Big difference in price there. I lose part of it because I've added micro switches to some of the servos. That adds a few dollars, and I'm going to use an Octopus 3 as a servo controller. We'll again look at that here in a few minutes. So I've also got some frog juicers, and these are basically polarity reversers. The idea is for the electrofrog turnouts, you isolate the frog and you put the frog juicer in there so that you can either, they'll reverse the polarity in the turnout to match the way the points are aligned. Midwest cork roadbed, very standard stuff here. Most of my turnouts are going to be hand thrown. Why? Well, because with this many turnouts, that's a lot of servos, even at 2 bucks a pop and so forth, electronics. And it's just easiest to do. Like I say, I don't want to spend my life building switch machines and stuff. So except I'm going to allow some exceptions where I've got crossovers where 2 turnouts have to be thrown at once. Then I'm going to put the servos in on those, and where they're hard to reach, I'll use servos. Then I'm going to mark those with LEDs or signals so my operators can see which ones are hands and which ones are electric. Now, something I may regret doing here is I'm going to make my turnouts replaceable. Again, my experience with modules and stuff, the track that tends to fail are the turnouts. You know, they break for some reason or another, and trying to get those guys out is a real bear. If you look at Electrofrog turnout, it's got 6 rails that you have to put joiners on. And with Electrofrog, typically you'll put insulated joiners on 2 of those. It says you don't solder them. So you got 4 others. And what I'm going to do is I'll use metal joiners, but I'm going to slide them so that just by sliding the joiners, I can easily pop the turnouts out to replace them. So that's looking forward to maintenance. And if I get bad electrical connectivity, I'll go back and solder them later. Here's my challenge with the switch machines I'm doing. This is what an Octopus 3 looks like. And it's got this pin field is for either a push button or a single pole, single throw toggle switch. And this is how you control the turnouts. And then this pin field is the goes out to the servos. Okay, so I've got servos with they have a snap switch on them, and I use just like a tortoise has a snaps. It has a double pull, double throw. Well, this is just a single pull, single throw. I'm going to use that for controlling the lights, the signal lights, and the signal lights are just basically show you which way the track is thrown, and then I've got a circuit that'll work. That'll let me do red or greens. I'm going to use I'm going to poke through the foam with a brass tubing, and I'm going to run music wire from here up through here. So the way the servo works, he rotates that way. That motion turns into, so it's a vertical turn to a horizontal motion, which then turns these, and this is kind of like a tried and proven way of doing things. I haven't built one of these yet because the challenge is how do I attach the servo to the bottom of extruded foam. Looks like this guy used hot foam or hot glue. That might work. I don't think that'll melt the foam. It might. I haven't tried it yet. Another possibility is I'll just attach the servo to like a block of wood and glue the block of wood to the foam. I know that will work. Or I'll cut out a depression in the foam and glue the block of wood in there. So this is an area for experimentation for me yet. Okay, let's do a quick tour of the layout, where we're going on this. Boy, I'm going a lot longer than an hour, it looks like. Okay, anyway, here's the yard. We'll start with the yard. And if I blow it up, it looks like this. I've got intermodal stuff here. I've got 2 tracks of 40 inches apiece that I can put in intermodal equipment. I've got 8 tracks of classification yard, a couple tracks for doing a servicing facility, a couple tracks for like a rip track and engine repair. These will all be hand throws. For in terms of equipment, I've already built the MyJack. Nice kit. There's an article in Model Railroading magazine about how you can detail it and make it look even nicer. I built this building. This will be my repair shop. I've got the Wheels of Time piggyback packer. Very nice model. Wheels of Time does super nice work. I'd like to put in a single bridge somewhere. I haven't figured out where. I got a pipe stuff building. Here's the inspection pit from Pico. That'll probably go in this track. Now, I've got the Bachmann diesel servicing facility. I don't know if I'm going to use it or not. And the reason why I may not use it is when I first, when I was putting this slideshow together, I went online to get a picture. I could have just taken a picture of the box, but I wanted to get a nice picture. And I went to eBay and found somebody had sold one of these on eBay. They got $153 for it. I'm going, $153 for a Bachmann kit? You gotta be kidding. So I don't know. Okay, we'll go around the corner. So here's the other side of the peninsula. And main track comes around here. Here's the scissors, double crossover. This will be the Cato stuff, the bridge. I'm going to put a power plant in here, 4 tracks for, you know, for gondolas of coal, bring them in as load, bring them out as empties, change them over between operating sessions. So I've got gondolas here, the Metro Power. I've got a cooling tower. This is from Tommy Tech. Makes a really nice looking little cooling tower for there. I got some house tracks. I'll take box cars, flat cars, hoppers, almost anything. Over in here, I stuck in some warehouse flats. The siding, I'll take box cars, for box cars to load and unload. I got the Tommy Tech guard entrance. Couldn't find a picture of it. Haven't built it yet. But basically, it's a fence with a guard shack.
Rodney, got
Yeah.
a question, quick one. Your scissor track from Cato.
Yeah.
Is it the same center to center mainline rail through there, the same as Pico? The distance between the two tracks?
You mean like the Pico scissors or double track?
Yeah.
That I don't know. I've never measured it. I know that it's the same distance this way as the bridges and their double track unitrack stuff.
Okay. Yeah.
And since
okay.
this is all flex, flex track, it probably doesn't matter because this is all individual track. It's not any double track stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Sure. So the idea is train loaded coal train comes in, drops the cars, his loads on one of these tracks, runs around it, comes back, pulls the empties out, hooks onto the loads, drops them back in here, comes back, picks up his empties and heads back out. So should be an interesting little switching area. Okay, next we'll look at the main switching area for just outside the classification yard, kind of an industrial area. This is the classification yard comes around. You can see the switching lead here. So this is the bridge we looked at. I've got Medusa cement. This will take shorty hoppers mostly. This is the Grips luggage manufacturing. Box cars, flat cars, maybe a covered hopper. I don't know what else could be a gone here. This is the Water Street Freight Terminal. I've built this up. This guy will take box cars, flats. I've got the Blair Line loading ramp here. So it's a team track, box cars, flats, maybe a gone, could be a tank car. So general, almost anything. Beverage distributor, which would be this guy, reefers. I've got factory, again, flat cars and box cars. This is DPM trackside transfer. I've built it up. Box cars mostly, flat cars, ADM grain, the elevators. So this will be covered grain hoppers, a lot of them. And I've built up most of these kits so far. I think there's 2 or 3 that I haven't done yet, but that's what that area will be. And again, should be some nice switching. I've got double track in here, so you can do runarounds. If I wanted to mess things up, I could have somebody switching in here, then have another through train come through and have the guy in here get off the tracks. So I think it'll be fun. Okay, down on the long edge. This comes off of the grain elevator. Down here, the main line comes through around here, goes around, makes a loop, comes back this side like that. In terms of the loop, I'm debating about this little crossover right here. And it looks, it looks real innocent sitting right there, but it adds a lot of really nice, interesting possibilities because when you're coming out staging over here, because this track goes to staging, you can go this way and you can then enter the classification yard from the left, or you can enter the classification yard from the right. So it gives us bi-directional. But the problem is it creates a reversing loop on the main line. So that is going to create an electrical challenge. The reversing loop is you come around this way, come back across, and now you can come back into it. And also creates a reversing loop then on the yard side. Okay, here's the mine. I'm calling it the old fossil mine. I'm using the Walters Western Flood coal loader. I got some tracks here. Okay, let's talk about the mining first. Train comes in, he does a balloon loop with empties. You'd fill them and turn around, come back the same way you came out. So I'm going to have to do some electrical work here. This one is easy because you can set the polarity of the balloon loop depending upon the polarity of the points here. I got some house tracks. You always need house tracks because the mine receives stuff. It receives equipment via the railroad, flat cars and stuff like that. They receive the explosives for the mining via tank cars, for example. So for the mine, I've got the Walters coal flood loader. I've got some high tension wires, and I've got a power substation from Tomitech. The question is, why do you need a power substation in a coal mine? And if you've never been out there, it's a fascinating process to see, and we may not be able to see it much longer with the way coal is going in this country. But the way it works is that they take some explosives out. It's open pit mining. Take explosives out and they blow a big hole in the ground that loosens up the coal. And there's a big thing called a drag line, a bucket, which scoops it up, and they dump the coal into these haulers. And then the haulers bring them back to the flood loader. They dump it in here. It goes up a conveyor belt, and that's how they load they pull the train in. And they load the coal, the gondolas to the flood loader. Now the catch is those drag lines are electric, and I mean they have cables going on to about the size of your arm. It's really amazing. So yeah, they need a lot of electricity. Here's that little blue building I was talking about when I showed you that picture of the coal mine earlier. So there's the substation. I'll put in, if you got coal, oil can't be too far behind. They kind of work on more or less the same principles. It's just kind of different sources for how they became carbonized. Got the walking beam horsehead oil pump. I've got the motor for it. Got a storage tank, so he pumps into the storage tank. We have oil loading and unloading. A little bit of a place for somebody to do switching of tank cars. And then finally, there's this facility. I have a friend in Cheyenne. He owns Wasatch Rail Contractors, and they do, one of the things they do is car repair. So this is kind of like the universal industry. It takes everything. Because all kinds of cars need to be repaired. So I've got an interchange track. The idea is that a train will come through, they'll drop cars on one of the interchange tracks, pulls off the others, and continue on its way. Meanwhile, there's a 44-ton switcher in here that takes cars that have just arrived, puts them on the repair tracks, takes the old cars off the repair tracks, and puts them on the interchange. So a simple type swap operation. What doesn't show, and maybe we'll see a little later, so I've got an interchange track out here also. Again, interchange tracks are great because they'll take anything. So if you got some type of odd car and you want to run it, but you don't have a place for it to go or come from, put it on and have it run through the interchange track. Okay, next. Down in this area, the corner. Okay, it looks like this. Here's the interchange down here. But this is, as I pointed out, urban planning. I got to lay out my town. And I know what kind of buildings I want in them. The centerpiece is probably the Woodland Scenic County Courthouse. Other things I've got here, I think I've shown you guys the grill and chill. I think I posted pictures a couple months ago. I've done the hole-in-one donut shop. I've got some houses to build. I'm working on the City Classics gas station again. That turned out to be a surprise. So many of the kits have angled bevels on the sides in order to get them to line up easily and stuff. This guy doesn't. So these are squared off. So you need a square to do things right. And very interesting. The kit doesn't. It's not as, you got to do more work on it, I think, than the standard kit. The final building I'm going to put in, this I have to put in. This is Rodney Cigars, The story behind that is I was at the NMRA National in Sacramento in 2011, and we walked from the convention center down to the, I think it's the California Railroad Museum, and it was only half a mile or something. And we're walking down the street, and here was this building, Rodney Cigars. So we got a picture of it, and I brought it back, and one of my friends made a building, had it on his layout. After he passed away, that's one of the things I got off his layout as a memory. Okay, staging. There's what I've got done. Like I said, if you guys came over here, this is all you would see. So not too much. And you can see the bad corner in here. There's 2 curved turnouts back in here. This is why I need to motorize these, and eventually I got punched a hole through the wall here. And what's really bad, I'm a little hesitant about, is there's going to be a turnout in here. But I think I'll be okay. I may regret that decision. Here's the bracket I had to get under when I was determining the height. Okay, trains. I got coal train. That's the route it'll take. You go from the mine to the power plant, back to the mine, may do a power change in the yard. 24 cars would be about 94 inches. So here I'm talking about my typical train length, that ad hoc measure I mentioned earlier. So it'd be 94 inches plus locomotives and caboose. This is way longer, I think, than most of the sidings will handle and so on. Intermodals, if I do 14, and they'll go from the intermodal yard on right next to the door to staging and back. 14 wells would be 80 inches plus locomotives. So I can do manifests, staging yard to staging in 2 directions, through freight, staging to yard to staging in 2 directions. Do a peddler, which is basically a through freight, except that he may do a little switching en route. You got a local, yard to town to yard. The Wasatch switch, this would be the 44 tonner who switches the interchange with the repair facility. Yard switcher, there's always a little bit of yard work to do, moving, scrap around, sand cars, things like that. I got UP excursion train, 11 cars with 2 E units, would be 82 inches. I've got some Amtrak, 9 superliners, plus this would be about 82. And with grain, if I did 15-car grain train, I'd be about 66 inches plus locomotives and caboose. So my metric of typical train length would be about 80 inches, and this guy is over. But typically around 82 inches while I'm looking for sidings. Locomotives. John wouldn't know what I had. Had a couple bathrooms. I got these used. I probably wouldn't do it again, because after I put decoders in them, the shells, I may have to do something. There must be writing somewhere, because the shells don't sit level and they don't stay down very straight. Got a lot of Atlas. I don't have any problems. Pat Lana won't use Atlas because he says they just don't work for him. They don't run very good. I like these 2, 840 CWs. The reason being is that they don't have sound in them, but if you push the horn button, then the ditch lights will alternate, which is pretty cool. I like the effect. There's my Bachmann 44 tonner. When I bought them, they were cheap. It was one of the cheapest decoder equipped locomotives you can find. Now they've about doubled in price. I got a couple of BLIs, and John and I have been exchanging comments on BLIs. The asterisks mean that they're sound equipped. The E7s are some of the first ones I got. This is an SW7. I haven't run it much, but I really like it. It's got good sound. Now, usually when you put sound into an in-scale locomotive, you got to mill out some of the frame to make the speaker fit and stuff like that. What BLI did was the frame is what you see. In other words, they don't have a plastic shell on them. Rather, they cast the details when they cast the frame. So the thing is basically all metal, which makes it a little bit heavier. It's a nice puller, particularly for a small 4-axle locomotive. So not bad here. And BLI has gone on a clearance on them. I've seen you can get them for about 40% off, which is probably a pretty good deal. And it sounds pretty good. I got a couple Intermountains. I like their SD40-2. The first run, I worked at Intermountain until about 2 years ago. So I was able to get these at a discount, which is why I got them. But and I had a BN in Whiteface. I sold it to a friend, and now I wish I had, because it's a nice locomotive. The first run they got were really good, and then the quality went down a little bit. And who knows if they'll ever produce them again. Okay, Kato. I like the Katos. They run really nice. You pay a little bit more for them, but they run really good. I took the 848 or 844, the 282, and I put a TCS WOW sound in the tender, and that turned out pretty good. So I've got a nice steam engine. This one SD70 Mac, I put an MRC sound decoder in it, and there's a reason some people say MRC stands for Model Railroad Crap. This speaker is on the light board, and so it vibrates a little bit, and it's not baffled very good, but it's better. Little sound in this case is better than no sound until you listen to like the SW7 or the SD42s. I got a couple of Lifelikes, some microtrains, and a Walther. So as you can see, I'm well stocked in terms of little 4-axle switchers. Rolling stock. Here's my manufacturer. A lot of Atlas. I haven't had a lot. I hesitate a little bit about the couplers. The glad hands are always dropping out. I haven't replaced very many of the couplers, but these typically I buy these because they're nice detail, and they used to be reasonably cheap. I got a lot of Concord. That's deceptive because a lot of the Concord stuff are containers. Let's see, a lot of Intermountain, most of them covered hoppers. As you can see, it's just a little bit of everything. The Precision Masters were used. I'm migrating to metal wheels. I'd put those on the cars I like the best, particularly the covered hoppers. I've been putting metal wheels on those. Mostly everything's truck mounted couplers. I got a few used ones that were body mounted. I'll probably mix and match body and truck mounted couplers. I know a lot of people say don't do it, particularly when you're trying to back stuff up. I guess I will see. And I use microtrains or equivalent couplers, no repeaters. Here's the types, a lot of containers, a few really long auto racks and stuff. As you can see, I got an addiction for covered bay hoppers, a little bit of everything. So I want to be able to, I want places on the layout that I can use almost everything. The ones that don't have spots on the layout, like the auto racks and parts, those will just be run-throughs. Put them in staging, maybe run them into the yard and then somewhere else. Locomotives, some passenger equipment, E7s, the steam engine, some F40s, some Amtrak head-end stuff, superliners. Most of the superliner stuff is phase 2, simply because I bought it when it was used, when I was first starting out in N-scale. For the Legacy, UP Legacy, I bought a couple of the 4-packs and 6-pack of Legacy cars, and I supplemented them with individual cars because I was trying to duplicate a little bit, the heritage fleet that you see. Then somebody gave me a City of Los Angeles because I'd helped him with his signaling. So I'm swimming in UP passenger equipment. Technology. My track diagrams made with X-Track CAD for layout planning. It's freeware. That's one of the reasons I use it. I also played with some of the other track planning programs, and I found this one was the easiest for me to get started with. I've stuck with it. I'm using Digitrax LocalNet for the layout control. I've got JMR Decoder Pro and Operations. Decoder Pro for programming decoders, Operations Pro for doing the car routing for the layout. And I'm using a Raspberry Pi in a kind of testbed type situation. We'll look at that. Okay. Hook the pieces together. Got the layout, DCS 100, LocalNet, UR90s, Now, I'm doing something a little different here in that I don't have radio throttles. Why? Because they were cheaper when I was buying this stuff. And second of all, they're good enough. When we were taking modules to shows, even like at the Western Stock Show, we would put two UR90s up on PVC, pipe, a little bit above the layout, and we did IR, and we had no problems with them. Meanwhile, all these other guys are out there with their radio throttles, and you got all the radio interference going on. They were having runaways, and people were still on other people's trains and stuff like that. So the IR worked in an area like the Western Stock Show. I figure in a closed-in room with white walls, I should be able to bounce the IR signals off the walls without any problem. We've also, at Pat Lana's, we've had trouble with his radio throttles. Sometimes a person will be holding them down, like around belly button level, and his back to the receiver, and the radios won't work. The signals be blocked by the body. So I've gone with the IR, and so far I think this will work out for me. And the room isn't that big, if I need to, I can always plug in. I'll put some standard jacks around the layout. And I got DB150 over here. That was my first command station. If I'd known what it was, I probably wouldn't have bought it because it's limited. It's not really a very good command station. Okay, this is my test bed type of thing. Track. I've got a double pull, double throw, so I can, with a DCS50 that I can program decoders with. I got a local net, local buffer, USB going into a Raspberry Pi. The Pi is just a single board computer. It runs JMRI very, very well. It's got one plug which goes into wired LAN inside the house, home network, which I've got this computer on. I can run program called Type BNC, and basically I log into the Pi, and it's just like I'm sitting at the keyboard monitor of the Raspberry Pi, but from here. It also has a wireless connection, so I can go to the wireless network in the house, and my laptop is also wireless. I can run Type BNC in there, and I can then log into the Pi just as though I was sitting right at the Pi itself. And sometimes if you guys want, I'm putting together another presentation for the Northern group on JMRI and using it on a Raspberry Pi. And that was a lot longer than I figured, but that's material I put together.